Following the showdown at the Ghost Market, word of Zhong Kui's strengths spread like wildfire, keeping most spirits in line. However, the world is a big place, and it's full of old-timers, ancient evils that have been lurking in deep forests or forgotten tombs for centuries. These aren't your average street ghosts. They've spent 1,000 years hardening their souls, making them nearly immune to physical attacks. Zhong Kui received an urgent report from the Underworld. An incredibly stubborn and powerful wraith was haunting an abandoned manor on the outskirts of the city. This entity wasn't just scaring people. It was draining the life force of anyone who got too close, and its skin had become as tough as iron. Normal talismans simply shattered against its back. Zhong Kui let out a grim smile and reached behind his back. He slowly drew a long, elegant sword. The blade shimmered with a cold, ethereal light, and embedded in the steel were 7 gems that sparkled like distant suns, arranged in the pattern of the Big Dipper. This was the 7-star sword, a supreme Taoist treasure forged to execute the most unyielding demons. As Zhong Kui stepped into the decaying manor, the temperature plummeted to freezing, and a whirlwind of black soot lunged at his head. The wraith, arrogant in its ancient power, manifested as a towering shadow with jagged claws, laughing as it charged. Zhong Kui didn't move an inch. He gripped the hilt, his lips moving in a silent, ancient incantation. Suddenly, the 7-star sword erupted with a blinding violet gold light. As he swung, the blade let out a sound like a dragon's roar, cutting through the stagnant air. Strike! Zhong Kui bellowed. A crescent wave of pure, righteous energy surged from the blade. It hit the black mist with the weight of a mountain, and the iron-skinned wraith didn't even have time to scream before it was disintegrated into stardust. The single strike didn't just kill the demon, it purified the entire manor, blowing away centuries of filth and curse work as Zhong Kui sheathed his sword. The sheer authority radiating from him was enough to make every monster within 100 miles go into hiding for a long, long time. We've seen that the 7-star sword can wipe out any demon, but Zhong Kui knows that to keep the Underworld running smoothly, you need more than just a big weapon. You need justice. In this chapter, Lord Zhong hangs up his traveling cloak, steps into the Hall of Hades, and picks up the judge's pen, a mystical tool that can decide a soul's fate in the blink of an eye. The hall is bone-chillingly cold, lined with rows of ghost soldiers who are as terrifying as they are disciplined. Zhong Kui sits high on the bench, his piercing eyes scanning the crowd. It doesn't matter if you were a powerful prime minister or a billionaire merchant in your past life. Once you stand before him, you're just a soul with a record. The judge's pen is no ordinary quill. It has the power to manifest a person's life story directly from their soul. First up is a notorious village bully. This guy is still trying to talk his way out of trouble, bragging about the few silver coins he donated to a temple once. Zhong Kui lets out a scoff that echoes like thunder. He flicks the pen through the air, and suddenly, shimmering images appear in the mist. The bully stealing land from widows and terrorizing the weak. You dare lie to a god. Zhong Kui's voice booms. He brings the pen down hard, marking a thick red stroke in the book of life and death. With that one mark, the bully's sentence of a few centuries in the hell of grinding is sealed. Next, a poor old woman is brought forward. She never had a penny to her name, but she spent her life helping neighbors and being kind. Zhong Kui's expression softens. The tip of his pen moves with a gentle grace, adding blessings and longevity to her record for her next reincarnation. This pen doesn't just write, it balances the universe. With Zhong Kui presiding over the court, the chaotic energy of the ghost realm begins to settle. The evil spirits are too terrified to act up, and the good souls finally find their way home. Zhong Kui had been running the Underworld court with an iron fist and a fair heart, bringing perfect order to the realm of the dead. But the mortal world is a vast place, filled with ancient mountains and deep waters where countless spirits hide. Some of these creatures are master shapeshifters. They can turn into beautiful maidens or elegant scholars so convincingly that even the most seasoned ghost soldiers can't tell the difference. Zhong Kui realized he needed more than just strength. He needed a living map that could see through any disguise. One day, while patrolling the frozen barrens of the far north, Zhong Kui saw a radiant light piercing through the snow. A magnificent divine beast stepped out from the mist. It was a sight to behold. It had the body of a snow-white lion, a single majestic horn on its head, and most incredibly extra eyes positioned along its flanks. This was Baze, the legendary beast who knows the true nature of everything and can call out the names and weaknesses of all 11,520 types of monsters in existence. Now, Baze is a proud creature. It only appears to the most righteous leaders. When it saw Zhong Kui, it didn't run. Instead, human voice, I have long heard of Lord Zhong of Zhongnan, a man with a sword that slays evil and a heart that feels for the innocent. I wish to assist you, so that no demon on earth can ever hide again. Zhong Kui let out a booming laugh of delight and vaulted onto Baze's broad, powerful back. The beast was fast. It moved like a bolt of lightning across the terrain. But its real power was its mind. As they galloped past mountains and rivers, there's a 1,000-year-old fox hiding in that cave, or watch out, there's a water sprite lurking under those rapids. With Baze as his mount, Zhong Kui's radar was officially maxed out. It didn't matter how deep a demon hid or how pretty a disguise it wore. If Baze so much as sneezed, their true form was revealed. From that moment on, the Demon King's patrol became the ultimate nightmare for every monster under the sun. Picking up from our last adventure, with the divine beast Baze as his mount and the 7-star sword at his side, Lord Zhong figured the monsters of the world would finally learn some manners. But as it turns out, there's something far harder to hit than a physical demon, the miasma of plague. It was the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, the Duanwu Festival, Dragon Boat Festival. Normally, this is a day for racing dragon boats and hanging mugwort to keep the bad vibes away. But this year, the early summer heat was suffocating and strange. The air didn't feel fresh. It smelled of stagnant earth and rot. A weird, sickly wind began to blow through the alleyways of Chang'an. Within days, rumors started flying. A strong man in the east suddenly collapsed with a burning fever. A child in the west began vomiting in his sleep. This wasn't a normal flu. Doctors were handing out cooling herbs by the ton, but the number of sick people just kept growing. Up in the clouds, Zhong Kui looked down, his brow furrowed into a deep knot. He tapped one of the eyes on Baze's flank and asked in a low voice, Old friend, look at that gray fog crawling over the city. What kind of monster are we dealing with? Baze sniffed the air, its expression turning grim. Lord Zhong, these aren't your typical demons. These are plague ghosts, born from the damp summer rot and the lingering resentment of the world. They have no solid form. They ride the wind and slip into people's lungs. Using a sword on them is like trying to cut water. It just won't work. Zhong Kui looked at the terrified families below, clutching their lucky charms and praying for help. He tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword and let out a cold snort. If these things think they can ruin the festival on my watch, they've got another thing coming. Down in the mortal world, People were frantically pinning up portraits of Zhong Kui, begging for a miracle. Little did they know, a war without a single drop of blood was about to begin in the sweltering summer heat. Picking up from the last chapter, that plague mist was like a heavy, suffocating lid trapped over the city of Chang'an. But as the saying goes, misfortune never comes alone. As the summer heat intensified, the venomous creatures lurking in the shadows, nourished by the dark energy of the plague, began to mutate into monstrous forms known as the 5 poison demons. The common folk were busy hanging mugwort and calamus over their doors, hoping to ward off the sickly smell in the air. The sound of skittering and scratching began to echo from the floorboards and the roof beams. First, a green snake as thick as a water barrel slithered into a wine cellar in the East District. It flicked its tongue, exhaling a toxic vapor that turned every jar of fine wine into deadly poison. Then, a black scorpion the size of a millstone crawled into the textile market, its blue-tinted stinger sharp enough to punch through a thick wooden door with a single strike. And the lizard demons emerged as well. Each one was a nightmare brought to life, charging through the streets and turning a festive holiday into a scene of pure terror. In folklore, these are the 5 poisons. They gathered not just to feed on the toxins in the air, but to seize the moment when the yang energy is at its peak to transform the human world into their personal venomous nest. Wails of despair filled Chang'an as people barricaded themselves indoors. Families huddled together, trembling as they bowed before the portraits of Zhong Kui on their walls. "Lord Zhong," they cried, "you are the hero who slays ghosts. Please rid us of these men, eating pests as well." High above in the clouds, Zhong Kui watched the chaos with cold, piercing eyes. His mount, the divine beast Baze, let out a low growl, the eyes on its flanks glowing with a golden light as they locked onto the heat signatures of the 5 monsters below. Listen closely. As the Dragon Boat Festival approached, the midsummer sun was supposed to bring warmth and life. Instead, a heavy, sickly mist began to crawl over the villages. This wasn't just a change in the weather. It was the 5 venomous kings, the spirits of the snake and lizard, stirring up trouble. They were riding the evil chi of the season, spreading pestilence and making the common folk fall ill left and right. Up in the spirit realm, Zhong Kui smelled the rot in the air. He didn't just see the black clouds. He felt the people's misery. His thick eyebrows shot up like jagged mountain peaks, and his iconic beard bristled with fury. "How dare these slithering pests ruin the people's festival?" he roared, with a swirl of his crimson official robes, which glowed like a living flame against the dark sky. Zhong Kui descended. He didn't come alone. His ghostly attendants were right behind him. But the star of the show was the 7-star sword at his hip. The 5 venomous kings thought they were clever, hiding behind their wall of toxic fog. But Zhong Kui didn't hesitate. He drew his blade, and a flash of divine gold light sliced through the darkness. With a thunderous shout, he swung the sword, striking down the kings and scattering their poisonous influence back into the shadows. As the blade fell, the thick, choking mist vanished. The sun broke through, the evil chi dissipated. And suddenly, the villagers felt the weight lift from their chests. They looked up and saw a fleeting glimpse of a massive red-robed figure, sheathing a glowing sword before vanishing into the ether. From that day on, the people realized that Zongzi and Realgar wine weren't enough. They started a new tradition, hanging pictures of Zhong Kui slaying the 5 venoms on their doors during the festival to keep the plague at bay. With the red-robed deity on watch, no creeping thing dared to enter. After Zhong Kui sent those 5 venomous pests packing, Word spread like wildfire through the tea houses and market stalls. Everyone knew that if you wanted a peaceful night's sleep, you needed the Ghost Eater on your side. Enter the Lin family. Old Man Lin had finally saved up enough copper to build a fine new house on the edge of town. Fresh cedar beams and clean white walls. But the celebration didn't last long. On their very first night, the air turned ice cold. Shadows began to dance on the walls without a candle in sight, and a chilling, scratchy laughter echoed from the rafters. The house was unclean, haunted by lingering spirits that didn't want any new neighbors. Terrified and sleep-deprived, Old Man Lin sought advice from a local scholar. "Don't bother with expensive exorcists," the scholar said, with a wink. "Just go to the city and find a portrait of the great judge Zhong Kui. Paste it right on your front door and let him do the talking." Old Man Lin did exactly that. He found a painting where Zhong Kui looked particularly fierce, eyes bulging like copper bells, a beard like a tangled thicket, and his hand gripped tight around his 7-star sword. He pasted it up with trembling hands. That night, as the clock struck midnight, a pale, wispy shadow tried to slip through the door crack. But the moment it touched the threshold, it was as if a physical wall of heat slammed into him. The Zhong Kui on the paper seemed to stir. His painted eyes glared with a righteous fire that cut through the dark. The ghost let out a yelp of pure terror and bolted, disappearing into the earth. The next morning, the Lin family woke up to birdsong and warm sunlight. The heavy, suffocating gloom was gone, replaced by a sense of absolute safety. Zhong Kui wasn't just a legend anymore. He had become the ultimate guardian of the home. Word of the Lin family's peaceful night spread far and wide. Soon, the fierce face of Zhong Kui was watching over every alleyway and courtyard in the city. But the creatures of the night, they hadn't quite learned their lesson yet. It was a moonless night, the kind of dark where you can't see your own hand in front of your face. Down a narrow, winding lane, a few sickly green shadows were huddling together. These were the loitering ghosts, spirits who, in their past lives, were nothing but troublemakers and lazy bums. Even in death, they couldn't stay quiet, spending their nights sneaking into kitchens to steal offerings or making eerie noises just to frighten children. They set their sights on a modest-looking house at the end of the lane. The lead ghost, a spindly thing with long twitching fingers, scaled the wall with a wicked grin. But the moment his head cleared the roofline, he froze. His jaw dropped, and he tumbled backward, landing in a heap on his companions. "What is wrong, boss?" One of the smaller spirits hissed, "Did a cat scratch you?" The leader pointed a trembling finger toward the lintel of the door. Look at that." There, hanging above the entrance, was a simple paper portrait of Zhong Kui. Even in the pitch black, the eyes of the deity seemed to pulse with a faint, golden authority. His red robes looked like cooling embers ready to burst into flame at any moment. The sheer aura of wretchedness radiating from the paper was enough to make their ghostly forms feel like they were melting. The ghosts didn't wait around to see if the portrait would move. They knew that as long as the Ghost Eater was standing guard, and this entire street was off limits, they scrambled away into the deep shadows, tripping over their own feet in a desperate rush to get as far away as possible. And so, the saying went, "Where Zhong Kui watches, even the shadows flee." The people slept soundly, knowing that the night no longer belonged to the monsters. As the lunar year wound down to its final hours, the atmosphere changed. This was New Year's Eve, the time when the barrier between worlds is at its thinnest, and every little imp and spook tries to sneak into the human world to snatch some holiday luck. But the people were ready. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the silence was shattered. Bang, pop, crackle, The youth of the village began lighting firecrackers in every courtyard. The smell of sulfur filled the air, and red paper scraps danced like snow. This wasn't just for fun. The roar of the Baozu firecrackers was meant to startle any lingering malevolent spirits and send them running. But the real spectacle was happening in the town square, the Nuo ritual. The drums began a heavy, rhythmic dong-dong-chang. A massive man stepped into the torchlight, wearing a ferocious, hand-carved wooden mask with bulging eyes and a wild beard. Dressed in those iconic crimson robes, he began the dance of Zhong Kui. This wasn't just a performance. It was an invitation for the spirit of the great judge himself to descend and join the fray. With every stomp of the dancer's foot and every swing of his wooden sword, the air seemed to crackle with divine energy. Legend has it that at this very moment, the real Zhong Kui stands invisible beside the dancer, his tiger-like gaze swept over the shivering crowds of hundreds of ghosts hiding in the gutters. "Begone," the dancer roared, slicing his sword through the smoke. The spirits, terrified by the combination of the deafening explosions and Zhong Kui's overwhelming presence, broke and fled into the night. The villagers cheered, their hearts light and fearless. They knew that with the firecrackers clearing the air and Zhong Kui guarding the gate, the old year's bad luck was blown to bits, leaving only room for blessings. While the mortal world was busy celebrating the new year, Zhong Kui sat upon his dark throne in the spirit realm. Around him, ghostly attendants stood in silence, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense from 1,000 shrines. But Zhong Kui wasn't looking at the petitions of the living. He was staring into the flickering flames of the red candles on his desk, lost in thought. He was a god now, yes, but he was a man of honor first. And a man of honor never forgets the person who stood by him when the rest of the world turned away. His mind drifted back to his darkest hour, the day he took his own life on the palace steps, out of shame and fury. Back then, he was just a failed scholar with a hideous face and no one to claim his body. It was his dear friend and fellow townsman, Du Ping, who risked his reputation to give Zhong Kui a dignified burial. Du Ping didn't care about the emperor's displeasure or the bad luck of a suicide. He bought a fine coffin and laid his friend to rest with the respect a scholar deserved. Zhong Kui sighed, his voice echoing like low thunder through the halls of the dead. "If it wasn't for your kindness, I would be nothing but a wandering, bitter ghost. You didn't just bury my body, you saved my soul." Zhong Kui knew that time was passing in the world above. Du Ping was getting older, and his family wasn't as wealthy as it once was. Most importantly, Zhong Kui remembered his younger sister, the girl he had left behind. She was now a young woman of marriageable age, and without a proper dowry or a brother to protect her, her future looked uncertain. With a sudden, Zhong Kui stood up. His tiger eyes flashed with a new purpose. "I am the king of ghosts now," he declared. "It is time I paid my debts. If my sister needs a dowry, I shall bring her the finest the 3 realms have to offer." He began to summon his most trusted ghostly soldiers. He wasn't just planning a visit. He was planning a procession that would bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Once Zhong Kui had decided to repay Du Ping's kindness, he didn't waste a single moment. He wasn't just a god. He was a brother who had missed his family, and he was determined to see his sister married with the dignity she deserved. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the hour of twilight when the veil between our world and the next is at its thinnest, a strange, shimmering mist began to roll into Zhong Kui's old home village. From within the fog came the sound of flutes and drums, but the music had a haunting, ethereal quality that made the hair on the back of people's necks stand up. Leading the way were his 5 ghostly attendants. Some held high lanterns with flickering green flames that cast no heat but warded off every evil thing for miles. Others carried heavy, ornate chests filled with treasures from the spirit realm, pearls that glowed like the moon, and silks that felt like water. In the center of it all was a grand crimson wedding sedan chair, stitched with gold thread and glowing like a hearth fire. This was no ordinary carriage. It was carried by 4 of the strongest ghost messengers, their feet barely touching the dusty road, as they moved with a supernatural, gliding speed. And there, at the head of the procession, rode Zhong Kui himself on his majestic spirit beast, clad in his official red robes, and with his 7-star sword at his side. He looked every bit the Emperor of Exorcism. Yet, as he neared the familiar gates of Du Ping's estate, the fierce glare in his eyes softened. For the first time in centuries, the great demon hunter felt the warmth of home. Local spirits and minor demons who were lurking in the shadows saw the red-robed deity coming and scrambled into the earth, terrified of his power. This wasn't just a march. It was a triumphant return. With the human world safe and his sister happily married, Zhong Kui had become a very busy deity. Between patrolling the boundaries of the Underworld and presiding over the courts of the dead, he barely had a moment to rest. But as the saying goes, when the cat's away, the mice will play. The ghosts. Zhong Kui had 5 loyal ghost attendants who had followed him ever since he subdued them. Usually they were the picture of discipline. But one day, while Zhong Kui was away at the Celestial Palace reporting to the Jade Emperor, the 5 of them decided the Great Hall was looking a bit too serious. It started with a dare. One ghost found Zhong Kui's stash of ceremonial wine and took a swig. Then another found his official magistrate's hat and put it on, dancing around and mocking the serious expressions of the Underworld judges. Before long, the halls that usually echoed with solemn chants were filled with ghostly laughter, somersaults, and the clatter of overturned furniture. They were having the party of a lifetime, thinking the boss wouldn't be back for hours. Suddenly, the laughter died in their throats as a massive shadow loomed over the threshold. Zhong Kui had returned. His beard was practically sparking with divine fury, and his eyes glowed like twin furnaces. He didn't say a word. He simply gripped his peachwood staff. The 5 ghosts didn't even try to run. They scrambled to their knees, trembling so hard their spiritual forms began to flicker. Zhong Kui roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the Underworld. He didn't just punish them. He reminded them of their duty. He taught them that those who served the law must be the first to follow it. By the time he was finished, the 5 ghosts were the most well-behaved spirits in the 3 realms, completely reformed and ready for the ultimate honor that was about to come. After the ghostly procession faded into the morning mist, Du Ping stood at his gate, looking at the chests of treasure and the lingering scent of incense in the air. He realized that while his old friend had become a formidable deity with a face of iron, the heart of the scholar he once knew remained unchanged. From that day forward, the Du household became known far and wide as a house of fortune. But Du Ping didn't let this divine favor go to his head. Instead of becoming arrogant, he used the wealth Zhong Kui had gifted him to help the poor, continuing the legacy of kindness that had started this whole journey up in the spirit realm. Zhong Kui never stopped watching over his sworn brother. Whenever a shadow of bad luck tried to creep toward the Du family, or a minor ailment threatened their peace, Zhong Kui would send his cleverest ghost attendant to quietly brush the trouble away under the cover of night. It was a perfect balance. Du Ping kept the flame of human virtue alive on earth, and Zhong Kui stood as a silent sentinel in the heavens. Their friendship became the ultimate example of loyalty, a bond so strong that even the gates of the underworld couldn't break it. With the human world safe and his sister happily married, Zhong Kui had become a very busy deity. Between patrolling the boundaries of the underworld and presiding over the courts of the dead, he barely had a moment to rest. But as the saying goes, when the cat's away, the mice will play. The ghosts. Zhong Kui had 5 loyal ghost attendants who had followed him ever since he subdued them. Usually they were the picture of discipline. But one day, while Zhong Kui was away at the Celestial Palace reporting to the Jade Emperor, the 5 of them decided the Great Hall was looking a bit too serious. It started with a dare. One ghost found Zhong Kui's stash of ceremonial wine and took a swig. Then another found his official magistrate's hat and put it on, dancing around and mocking the serious expressions of the underworld judges. Before long, the halls that usually echoed with solemn chants were filled with ghostly laughter, somersaults, and the clatter of overturned furniture. They were having the party of a lifetime, thinking the boss wouldn't be back for hours. Suddenly, the laughter died in their throats as a massive shadow loomed over the threshold. Zhong Kui had returned. His beard was practically sparking with divine fury, and his eyes glowed like twin furnaces. He didn't say a word. He simply gripped his peachwood staff. The 5 ghosts didn't even try to run. They scrambled to their knees, trembling so hard their spiritual forms began to flicker. Zhong Kui roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the underworld. He didn't just punish them. He reminded them of their duty. He taught them that those who served the law must be the first to follow it. By the time he was finished, the 5 ghosts were the most well-behaved spirits in the 3 realms, completely reformed and ready for the ultimate honor that was about to come. Zhong Kui had come a long way from the brilliant but heartbroken scholar who took his own life on the palace steps. Through his unyielding justice in the underworld and his tireless protection of the mortal realm, his name had become a symbol of hope. One day, the dark skies of the spirit realm were suddenly pierced by 10,000 rays of golden light. A celestial decree from the Jade Emperor himself descended from the heavens. The decree recognized Zhong Kui's immense contributions, not just as a hunter of ghosts, but as a guardian of the cosmic balance. Zhong Kui adjusted his robes and knelt with his 5 attendants to receive the ultimate honor. The Jade Emperor bestowed upon him a title that echoed through the 3 realms, the Sovereign Demon, Slayer, and Thunder, commanding deity of righteousness. With this decree, Zhong Kui was no longer just a judge of the dead or a local door god. He became a supreme celestial commander with the power of thunder at his disposal to strike down the most powerful evils. His 7-star sword was infused with even greater divine light, and his faithful mount, the Bai Zi, glowed with celestial energy. As he stood up, Zhong Kui didn't look at his new crown or his reinforced sword with pride. Instead, he looked down at the mortal world. He saw the firecrackers of the new year, the red portraits on the doors, and the families sleeping peacefully because they believed in him. He realized that his true power didn't come from his title, but from the faith of the people. And so the legend ends, but his watch never does. From the mountains of Zhongnan to the gates of every home, the red-robed deity remains, the eternal shield against the dark, ensuring that justice always prevails over evil.